24 hours. That is the entire window. That is the only number that matters in this whole Kathy White story. And nobody, not Orlando, not Jaguar, not Liz, not a single tabloid sitting on this case for 14 years has ever walked you through what actually happens inside that window minute by minute. Tonight, we are going to do exactly that. We are going to run the clock backwards from the moment her body was found in that Manhattan apartment, and I am telling you right now, by the time we hit hour zero, you are going to understand why the Carters have spent over a decade praying nobody ever sits down and does the math out loud. Hit that like button before we start, subscribe if you have not already, because what we are about to lay out is the kind of thing that gets channels shadow banned for breathing in its direction, and the only way the algorithm lets it through is if you push it through with me. Let us go. Most of the videos floating around about Kathy White start in the same lazy place. They open with Orlando Brown saying something wild, they cut to a Jaguar Wright clip, they slap a Beyonce belly band on the screen, and they expect you to connect the dots yourself. That is not what this is. That is gossip dressed up in a hoodie, pretending to be journalism. What we are doing tonight is forensic. We are taking the last 24 hours of a 29-year-old woman's life, and we are placing every confirmed event, every phone call, every text message, every hotel sighting, every person she spoke to on a single timeline. And then we are going to overlay it with the public schedule of two of the most surveilled people on planet Earth in that exact same window. Because the second you put those two timelines side by side, something jumps off the page that I have not seen one single commentator on this platform talk about. Not Liz, not Jaguar, not even Orlando, and he's the one screaming the loudest. So before we even press start on the clock, let's reset the room. Kathy White, 29 years old, American publicist, beauty and fitness specialist, long arms, broad shoulders, the kind of dark robin brown skin tone that people who grew up around the Knowles family swear they recognize the second they look at Blue Ivy in natural light without 3 layers of strategic studio makeup smoothed over her features. That comparison alone is what started the whispers back in 2010, but here's what most of the so-called experts skip. The affair rumor did not show up first. The affair rumor was bolted on later. The original Hollywood Street King story in August of 2010 was not about a side piece. It was about a surrogate. A paid, contractual, NDA-bound surrogate allegedly walked into the situation by her own best friend, who at the time was a fixture on the same nightclub and music video circuit as the Carters. That detail matters because if you start the story at affair, you are already been redirected. The original allegation was a baby. The affair narrative was the cover story for the baby, which is the exact reverse of how every news cycle has tried to sell it to you since. Now, hold that thought because we are about to start the clock. Hour 24, roughly 1 full day before her body is discovered. According to Liz Crokin, the journalist who has gone on record more times than anyone else can stand to count, Kathy is alive, she is reachable, and she is in active communication about sitting down for what Liz herself described as an explosive interview. Liz says, in her own words, that Kathy answered her phone way she always did. There is no panic in her voice, there is no hint that she believes she is being followed, she is not asking for protection, she is not hiding. She is, in every observable way, a young professional preparing to walk into the biggest career moment of her life, which is exactly the problem, because at hour 24, Kathy White does not believe she is in danger, and that's almost always the most dangerous hour a person can ever live through. Hour 22. The first silence. Liz tries to follow up. There is no answer. She does not panic yet because publicists are busy. Publicists juggle phones. Publicists go dark for hours at a time when they are prepping a client or a press cycle. So the first silence is not a red flag. It is filed mentally as a callback. But this is the moment, this exact moment around hour 22 that I want you to lock into your head because we are going to come back to it. Because if you believe the official version of events, an aneurysm dropped this woman out of nowhere with no warning. If that is true, then somewhere inside that window between hour 24 when she was fine and hour 22 when she went quiet, a perfectly healthy 29-year-old woman went from coordinating an interview to being neurologically incapable of picking up a telephone. That is a very specific medical event. Aneurysms can happen that fast. They absolutely can. Nobody is denying that. What we are denying is the convenience, because the timing of this particular aneurysm is so perfectly synced with a planned media drop that even the most skeptical viewer in the comments section has to admit that the universe has a strange sense of humor when it comes to billionaire couples. Hour 18. Liz calls again. Still nothing. And here is the detail almost every retelling of this story leaves on the cutting room floor. Kathy did not just stop answering Liz. She stopped answering everyone in her professional orbit. That is not the behavior of a busy publicist. That is the behavior of a phone that has been physically separated from its owner. Phones, in our line of work, are limbs. You do not lose a limb for 18 hours without somebody noticing, unless something has already gone catastrophically wrong on the other end of that line. And remember the contract piece. If the original allegation is true, if Kathy was carrying a child under a surrogacy agreement, then there are people whose financial future is wired directly into her body. Those people do not lose contact with her for 18 hours by accident. There is no version of that arrangement where the principal parties shrug and say, maybe she'll call back tomorrow. The silence at hour 18 is the loudest sound in this entire story. Hour 8. Roughly midway through the blackout, Liz starts working her network. She begins reaching out to colleagues. The colleagues at this stage of the timeline have not been told anything yet, which means whatever happens to Kathy is still being contained inside a very tight circle. 12 hours is also, and please write this down because this is the kind of detail that separates a real breakdown from the surface level recaps everyone else is doing. 12 hours is the approximate window in which a body left undiscovered in a private apartment will begin to show clear physiological signs of the actual time and cause of death. Coroners can tell very precisely what happened to a person and roughly when inside that 12-hour bracket. After that, things get messier. After that, the body itself becomes a less reliable witness. So if you are someone who wanted to make absolutely sure that the autopsy was going to land on the most ambiguous, most plausibly natural cause of death possible, you would want the body to be discovered just outside that 12-hour clean window. You would want it to be discovered at hour 10 or 11 maximum. Guess approximately when Kathy White was found. I'll let you do that math in the comments. Hour 6. The story tightens. By now, in the version of events Liz Crokin has told publicly, the worry has set in. There is a sense in the network that something is wrong. But here's where the parallel timeline I promised you at the top of this video kicks in. Pull up the calendar of the Carters for that same week in September of 2011. They were not in hiding, they were not in seclusion, they were in motion. Public motion, the kind of motion that creates a paper trail of flight logs, hotel bookings, security details, and curated photo opportunities. And what you find when you overlay that paper trail on top of Kathy's silence is not a clean alibi. It is a perfectly engineered alibi. Two of the most visible people on Earth are documented being somewhere very obvious during the exact hours that the least visible person in their orbit, allegedly carrying their child, goes completely dark. That is not how innocent people happen to be standing in a room. That is how innocent people are deliberately, surgically placed in a room by a team of professionals whose entire job is to make sure that when this story breaks, the calendar protects the client. Hour 0. Kathy White is found in her apartment. The official ruling, eventually, is brain aneurysm with other, quote, unestablished factors. Read that phrase again, slowly. Other unestablished factors. That is coroner language for we know something else was in the picture, we cannot prove it, and we are not going to fight about it. That language does not appear on a clean medical record. That language appears when a medical examiner is signing off on something he personally is not 100% sold on, but he is also not willing to drag himself and his office into a multi-year legal fight with a team of attorneys that could buy his entire department twice. Aneurysm and other unestablished factors is the cause of death equivalent of a shrug emoji with a 6-figure pension attached to it. Now let us widen the lens, because the clock is only half the story. The second half is what happens after hour zero. Because the cover-up, if you want to call it that, is in many ways more revealing than the death itself. Within days, the affair narrative is pushed hard, not the surrogacy narrative, the affair narrative. Why? Because an affair is a private embarrassment. A surrogacy contract is a paper trail. An affair can be denied with a smile and a tour photo. A surrogacy contract has signatures, lawyers, witnesses, escrow accounts, and medical records. If the public story stays on affair, the case dies in the gossip column. If the public story drifts towards surrogacy, somebody very rich gets a very real subpoena. So the entire media operation pivots almost overnight to making Kathy White look like a side chick. Side chicks do not get justice, side chicks get jokes, and jokes do not get courtrooms. This is where Claudia Jordan walks in, and I want to be very, very careful here because Claudia has come out swinging, denying that she ever saw Kathy pregnant, denying any introduction to anyone, denying the entire frame. Fine, take her at her word. Let us assume Claudia is telling the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That actually makes the story worse, not better. Because if Claudia, the best friend, the closest civilian to Kathy in that period, never saw a pregnancy, never witnessed an affair, never registered anything unusual, then the entire arrangement, if it existed at all, was being run completely outside Kathy's friend group. It was being run by people whose job it is to make sure best friends do not see anything. That is not a casual side piece. That is a managed asset. You do not have to take Claudia's denial as a takedown of the theory. You can take it, paradoxically, as confirmation of how tightly the operation was sealed. And then there is the belly. We have to talk about the belly because every single time this conversation flares back up, somebody pulls up the Australian interview footage where Beyonce sits down and the prosthetic, allegedly, bends and crumples in real time. I am not here to tell you what a fabric does or does not do under studio lights. I am here to tell you what the response to that footage was. Because the response from the Carter operation was not a doctor's note. It was not a sonogram. It was not a clip of the same shirt behaving normally an hour later. The response was silence, then deflection, then a very expensive maternity photo shoot 2 weeks later that conveniently overcorrected in the opposite direction. When you are accused of faking a pregnancy and your response is to release more visually staged pregnancy content instead of releasing actual medical proof that takes 30 seconds to provide, you are not answering the question. You are changing the subject. And in PR, changing the subject is the loudest possible confession. Then there is the floor, the $1.3 million hospital floor, the entire wing rented out, the other mothers reportedly inconvenienced, the contractor husband from Bed-Stuy going on the record saying his wife had just had a C-section and was being shuffled around like she did not matter. $1.3 million is not privacy money. Privacy money is a private room. Privacy money is a security detail in the hallway. $1.3 million is what you spend when you need to control who walks down a hallway, who sees what bed, who hears what cry, and who signs what paperwork. That is not the budget for a celebrity birth. That is the budget for a celebrity logistics operation. And the question nobody in the mainstream media ever asked at the time, the question I am going to ask right now, is this. If you have nothing to hide on the night your child is born, why are you paying the price of a starter home to make sure that nobody can independently verify what happened on that floor that night? Privacy is one thing. Operational opacity at that scale is another thing entirely. Now let us bring Pimp C into the room, because he is the part of the story that ties the whole tapestry, no, scratch that word, that ties the whole web together. Pimp C dies December 4, 2007. 33 years old, Mondrian Hotel, Sunset Strip, found unresponsive, official cause promethazine codeine effects and other unestablished factors. There's that phrase again, other unestablished factors. Twice in one story is not a coincidence. Twice in one story is a pattern. And according to DJ Paul, Pimp's body was reportedly positioned in a way that suggested he had been struck, posed almost in a prayer position, which is not a position you naturally fall into when you slip into a chemical sleep. That is a position you are placed. And the rumor that has followed Pimp C's death around for nearly 2 decades is that he had a tape. Not just any tape, a tape involving a major R&B singer and a major rapper from the same window. Orlando Brown spent 5 to 6 years close to Pimp before he died. Orlando says he never saw Pimp using the way the official story claims. Orlando says the substances were planted. Orlando also says, and this is the part that should make every single one of you sit up straight, that the Carters have allowed him to live because he is dismissed as crazy, while Kathy was not dismissed as crazy, and that is exactly why Kathy is not here. Stop the video. Rewind that last sentence in your head, because what Orlando is laying out, in his own scattered, polarizing way, is a survival rule. If the industry decides you're credible, you're a threat. If the industry decides you're a punchline, you're a pet. Orlando survives by being a punchline. Kathy did not have that exit ramp. Kathy was a polished, professional, photogenic publicist who was about to walk into a credible journalist studio and lay out names, dates, contracts, and bank transfers. There is no version of that interview where the story stays a tabloid story. The second she sits in that chair, it becomes a federal story. And federal stories do not get controlled by a PR firm. They get controlled by subpoenas. So somebody, somewhere in the 72 hours before that chair got filled, made a phone call. And we will probably never see the phone records, but we don't need the phone records to read the room. The room is screaming. Now, let us pivot to the one thing nobody on this platform is willing to say out loud, because everybody is too scared of the lawyers, and frankly, everybody should be. Here is the line I will say because it is the truth, and the truth is a defense. The argument is not that one specific person personally did one specific thing. The argument is that an operation exists, that an operation has existed for a very long time, that the operation has a budget, a legal team, a fixer network, a media wing, and a hospital wing, that the operation does not need a single person to pull a single trigger, because the operation is the trigger. You do not need a smoking gun when the whole house is on fire and there is a fire department on retainer that only puts out fires belonging to one family. That is what people miss when they argue about who specifically, allegedly, did what specifically. The point is not the trigger finger. The point is the architecture. And the architecture has been visible for years, if you know how to read a building. Blue Ivy. Let us land the plane on the kid, because the kid is the part of the story that is going to age the most, because every single year that goes by, that little girl looks less and less like the official story, and more like the original allegation. That is not a cruel thing to say about a child. That is a neutral observation about a face. Genetics are stubborn. Genetics do not care about a marriage contract, $1 million bonus per kid, a maternity photo shoot, or a hospital floor rental. Genetics keep showing up on a face year after year after year, and the face that keeps showing up on Blue Ivy is, according to people who knew Kathy personally, Kathy's face. Long arms, broad shoulders, a bone structure that no amount of strategic lighting and AI-assisted touch-ups can overwrite. And the more the Carter media machine tries to push edited images that nudge her toward a different palette and a different facial geometry, the more the original face fights back through the edits. There is a reason the Photoshop is getting more aggressive, not less, as she gets older, because the resemblance is not going away, it is intensifying. So, what do you do with all of this? What do you actually do as a viewer? Because at some point, a video like this either lands as entertainment or it lands as a wake-up call. And I am going to be very clear, this is not entertainment for me. This is a young woman who, if the allegations are even half right, walked into the wrong building on the wrong day and never walked out. This is a child who, if the allegations are even half right, will spend the rest of her life staring at billboards of a woman who is not her biological mother, while her actual biological mother is treated like a footnote in someone else's discography. That is not a meme. That is a generational wound, and we, the public, are part of the wound, because every time we stream the song, watch the tour, click the headline, we are voting on the cover story. We are casting a ballot that says we believe the official version, or at the very least, we are willing to keep the official version employed. That is a heavy thing to sit with, and I am not going to pretend it's light. Here is what I want from you. Not just a like, Not just to subscribe, although yes, drop the like, because if you do not drop the like, the algorithm buries this conversation in 3 hours, and the people who buried Kathy in the first place get to bury her again every time we hit publish. Drop the like. Now here is the actual ask. In the comments, I want you to do one of two things. Either pick a single hour on this timeline, anywhere from hour 24 down to hour 0, and tell me what you think happened inside that hour. Or if you have a personal connection to this story, if you knew Kathy, if you worked the floor at that hospital, if you were on a flight crew, on a security detail, on a press team, anywhere near this, you know how to find this channel, you know the side channels, you know the inboxes. The door is open. We protect sources here. We have done it before, and we will do it again, because some stories are bigger than a view count. Before we close, one last loop, because every good story closes a loop, and I promised at the top that something would jump off the page when you overlaid Kathy's silence with the Carter's calendar. Here is the loop. The most surveilled 24 hours of Kathy White's life are also the most documented 24 hours of two of the most photographed people on Earth. And yet, in every single retelling of this story for 14 straight years, nobody has ever sat down and matched the two timelines on the same page at the same time. Not a tabloid, not a documentary, not a podcast, not a forensic blogger. Why? Because the second you do that, the story stops being a rumor and starts being a question. And questions get answered in courtrooms, not comment sections. So we are going to keep asking. And the next video, the one I am dropping right after this, takes that exact overlay and walks you through the flight logs, the venue check-ins, and the social media metadata for that same week in September 2011. You think this one was heavy? The next one is heavier. Click the suggested video. Do not let the algorithm decide for you what you are allowed to know. Decide for yourself. I will see you in the next one. Stay loud, stay curious, and whatever you do, do not let them bury her twice.